Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
It is I, the one, the only.
I'm good.
Alright. Appreciate that. Thanks, guys. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2. Joining me today is the Comics Kid 2099.
Hello.
And Brit Without Fear.
No
A
more.
Geek for Fun. Oh, no, it's right. It's a Geek for Fun again.
Yes, I go through more identities than Hank Pym. I'm just geek for fun now, and will stay that way for the near future.
Oh, you youngins, always changing your screen names left and right.
Gotta
Don't
stay
like
hip.
it. Yeah. Anyway, yes, so we're here for another episode of Geeky Gentlemen, review episode, and Ruben has chosen what we're going to review today. Ruben?
Yes, the first 4 issues of Mike Mignola's HellBoy series, the first arc, which is called Seed of Destruction.
Yeah. Okay, so this is interesting because I just reviewed this a couple months back in September of 2018. And I rewatched my review of that after reading this and was like, am I a completely different person? Because I had a very different experience reading this issue, and I guess that just kind of goes to the circumstances surrounding when you read a thing. I don't know. It was kind of interesting. So, but yeah, I just did a review of this, and I'm just going to start off my thoughts on this with the same way I started off that one. I'm just going to call him Mike, because I cannot pronounce this dude's last name to save my life. I don't know why. It's not complicated. My mouth is just dumb. So I'm just going to go with Mike. Anyway. So, Ruben, what made you want to talk about HellBoy?
Well, last week we were talking about comic book timelines, and we briefly talked about HellBoy, how it was one of the few series that goes in real time. And then I thought, I hadn't read... I had reviewed several volumes of HellBoy in 2017, and so this is actually the 3rd time that I've read this, and I feel like I have a different opinion of HellBoy every time I read it, because the first time I read the first 8 volumes of the series and really didn't like it overall, and then when I was rereading it in 2017, I liked some of the volumes a lot more, and so I figured it had been a little while, about a year and a half since I had read any of it, so I thought it'd be good to check it out again and see if we could all talk about it.
Nice. Alfie, what's your exposure to HellBoy?
My exposure to HellBoy is literally 2 things. One, the trailer for the movie was on the Spider-Man 2 DVD. It always stuck out to me as a kid because I was just like, what the fuck is this? And the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a massive HellBoy fan, so he's done sketches of HellBoy with the Pharaoh and Yugi. And that's my only 2 pieces of exposure to HellBoy. I have no clue what this series is. I've heard of it because it's kind of popular in a niche sense, but yeah, this is my first time actually consuming a piece of media from that franchise.
Wow.
That is so crazy that you've never even seen the Ron Perlman movies or
No,
anything, huh?
literally just the trailer.
Wow. Cool.
That's pretty funny. All right, so I guess I'll be the weird one here. You can go watch my episode of Trade Talk where I reviewed this, because I was trying to get more independent, more Marvel stuff to talk about, because I'm just such a DC guy. And I read this, and I was like, man, I really enjoyed this. This has a lot of cool things, and I rattle off a bunch of those cool things. And then I read it this time, and I had to fight falling asleep through reading it. I was bored by this, and admittedly, you know, the first time you read it, it's got like this mystery aspect and this weirdness to discover, and so maybe that keeps your interest, and then if you just know where it's going, it doesn't work. I don't know, but I had just a wildly different experience. I did not remember what I thought of this beforehand, so I'm glad I waited till after to rewatch my review. But I swear to God, it's like I'm a completely different person just a couple months later. Because I had such a different reaction to it this time. How about you, Ruben? You said you didn't like it your first time through, liked it more your second. How about on the third try?
Well, I think I'm more consistent with volume 1 every time I've read it, but with later volumes in the series, I liked it a lot more, because the first time when I read this series, it's been years ago, I stopped reading a few volumes in, because I was waiting. I had heard so many people talk about it as one of the great series of the 90s, and then I just wasn't enjoying it. I read several volumes thinking maybe this is going to get better, and then it never did. But then reading it last year, later volumes got a lot better. But I do think if you are going to get into Hellboy, this is not the best of the series. This is still very it's Mike Mignola trying to find his ground as a storyteller, because up until now he was basically just an artist. He had done a lot of covers and occasional interior art at Marvel in the late 80s, but he hadn't really done any stories of his own. And this arc is scripted by John Byrne, but then John Byrne left after this arc. And so I think Mignola is still very much trying to figure out what he's doing. And so there's a lot of stuff here that doesn't work. There's some really cool stuff. I do think there's some neat stuff. Visually, I love Mignola's art. I think that he's a very good artist. There's one page where it's the end of one of the issues. I think it's the end of issue 2, where the right hand is like reaching up, and there's like I think it's a tentacle reaching down. That's a really cool image that I'm really surprised we didn't get that in the first movie. I think my problem with this volume, because a lot of this is kind of sort of adapted in the first movie, especially like the first issue. My problem is the movie does it better. Like the movie is just a better version of this. And so I watched the movie before I ever read any of the Hellboy comics. And so it was difficult for me, like, and you know, like Alfie, you haven't seen any of the movie stuff. So a lot of this, I'm curious what your experience was, but like in the movie, Professor Broom is killed by one of the Nazis who was there when Hellboy was summoned to Earth. And it's a very touching scene. Like, he has a good death. And then, like, Hellboy has a very human reaction to his father dying. And, like, it's all really good stuff. Here, a frog kills his dad, and then he doesn't react to it. He just goes and kills the frog. Like, we don't get to see him cry, or, like, we don't get to see him be sad. And it just, some of it feels like it's a rough draft in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that a bit on like the second read through. Like initially the dad's death is shocking, but then when you know it's coming, it's just like, wow, it's like Uncle Ben just dead in a couple panels.
Yeah, you don't get any time at all to get to know the professor.
Yeah, and Alfie, I stole that point from you. Like, no, it's just like, yeah, it's just, okay, it's like the Wayne's dead in a panel, and it's like really nothing there. It's just there, and he doesn't really feel like a character. That's not necessarily a problem, but it's very noticeable, you know? So yeah, I kind of get where you're coming from, Ruben, of this just doesn't seem like it's the best the series has to offer. I do think it works. On like a technical level, I think everything here is working and that it's legitimately engaging. I just don't think that it's like really, really impressive at all. It just feels really typical in a lot of ways.
Huh. Okay. See, I'm also having to rein myself in and not talk about like the entire Hellboy series, because like I think a lot of stuff like whenever I talk about Hellboy, I tend to talk about like the overall series, and like I really just I need to just talk about just these 4 issues. But yeah, I can kind of see, like, do you mean typical, like as far as like superhero stuff, or what do you mean?
A little bit like typical. It's weird to try to place this because this came out in '93 and we weren't doing as much of that, but like it feels pretty typical monster hunter kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's very Lovecraft inspired, but it has a very superhero ending, so that kind of feels oddly misplaced. I don't know. Just kind of like, yeah, it's just the Van Helsing kind of formula.
Yeah, and like you said, this wasn't being done as much at that time. Like Van Helsing, the movie hadn't come out yet. You had like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which kind of, sort of, you know, is kind of taking from the same influences as this, and the TV show anyway came after this. But yeah, I wasn't really thinking about it as being typical, but I thought you meant like, you know, World War II setting, like, you know. A lot of superhero comics have their roots in World War II because, like, that's when superheroes were becoming a thing. And so I thought you were maybe talking about that. Like, this is very heavily rooted in World War II with the villains being Nazis and well, allied with the Nazis.
Yeah. I don't know. Alfie, what are your general thoughts on this? Being that this is your cherry popper.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to refer. Well, I guess that's a good analogy because, like a lot of people's first times, this feels quite slow, unsure of itself, and maybe it needs to grow into its feet a little bit. I was kind of like Ian. You said that in your second read through, a lot of the twists, because of you knew what was coming, it made the reading a little less impactful as it was in the first time. And I'm like, I don't know, man. What did you exactly think was impactful the first time? This really just kind of is the epitome of things happen, we move on, the comic. There's no character here to me. Like I really I like the concept.
Yeah.
Obviously it's English, so I'm like, yes, that's right. I should have a personal basis in this like cultural that they're bringing into. But I know it's just, again, it felt very typical of like a secret government agency that's fighting the Nazis in the UK. It's never been done before, and I'm just like, we go through like this Scooby-Doo-esque haunted house with a Lovecraftian twinge. No, because that's a good thing, because Scooby-Doo is fucking awesome. But this is like, we don't even spend that much. All right, I'm going all over the place. But Ruben, you say John Byrne scripted this, which on the Comixology, I gathered that part. But John Byrne doesn't stick around after this, right?
No, I don't. I think after this arc, he's gone.
Okay, I understand now why it gets better. This is a typical John Byrne comic. This is why I do not like his Superman runs or his writing in general. It is so exhibition heavy with such supposedly badass one-liners that just really aren't. And I don't know, it's just everything feels flat. Like you say, it's not bad, but I almost wish it was worse so I could have more enjoyment with it. It's just kind of there, and I was kind of disappointed because I think the art's fucking fantastic.
Yeah, Mignola's art is just, like, I'm a guy who, you know, like, everyone's got those things that they just irrationally like in art. For me, 100% silhouettes. Silhouettes are the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Silhouettes are sexy as fuck, and Mignola's whole style is silhouettes.
Yep.
It's like, how can I put as little detail into this as possible? And it's just, yeah, there you go. And it looks great. It's so bold, and it just jumps off the page, all the heavy shadows. Like, he might as well just print this shit on black paper.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's great style and substance to it. But yeah, the plot, I don't know, I think some of the twists are kind of cool or whatever. Like, you wouldn't necessarily expect that in the first volume the bad guy is gonna be the creator of the hero.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, maybe we're just used to more long-running comic arcs, and you got to kind of put yourself into the context of, well, they didn't really necessarily know they'd get more than these first 4 issues.
Yeah.
So this very well could have been the end of it. So it's pretty well self-contained within that context of, you know, you get the heroes created by the villain and has to kind of stand on his own and all that stuff. I thought that was, you know, that was like a legitimately interesting twist.
I agree, but like, it's how I justify like the impact of a twist is as good as the idea can be. It's I feel like how the characters themselves react to that information really makes it. Like, if I understand what that emotionally means to the characters involved in the piece, it hits harder. And this, I just felt like, yes, I'm your creator, HellBoy, I'm here, and it doesn't. There's no back and forth beside generic. It's as if he was just another generic run-of-the-mill villain that he talks to him as well. I don't know much about HellBoy's character going forward, but I imagine how he reacts to his creator in this with kind of just tough, badass indifference seems like a standard for like this kind of archetype.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, I don't know, it's weird because it'd be like if at the end of I Am Gotham, Bane just showed up, you know? It's like, well, yeah, that's what it was all building to, but it just happened so quick. And that's, I don't know, it's kind of that, for me at least, my initial read-through, I think that worked a lot better than it did this time when I knew it was coming.
Sure.
And there are other things like that, like the fact that, you know, the father dies when, if you're in my position, if you watch the movie and like the father was around for a while, to see him die right away, it's like, oh wow, this is different. So like stuff like that, just it changes your perception a little bit. And keep in mind, I can barely remember the first Hellboy movie, and I think Ron Perlman's great in that, but that is kind of boring too. Ron Perlman and David Hyde Pierce are fantastic. But yeah, it does get a little boring.
It's been a long time since I've seen either movie. I remember them fondly, but I haven't gone back and watched either of them in a very long time. And so maybe I need to do that because we got that new Hellboy movie coming out this year. But yeah, I definitely, what I do remember the first movie, I think that like the bits that they take from this arc, I think they improve on them. Alfie, you're very correct. The characters, air quotes characters in this movie or in this book, don't have much character. I don't know if you guys have ever watched the like the Red Letter Media reviews of the Star Wars prequels, but like there's a really great bit in his review of The Phantom Menace where he talks about, in order to find out if you have a good character in a story, like describe that character without describing what they look like or what they wear. And the more you can describe them, like the more words you can use, the better character you have. And like that has really stuck with me, both in my own writing and also like looking at a story. And so like if I look at this and all I know about Hellboy is he gets angry, that's not much of a character. And then Liz and Abe are even less characters because they're just there and I couldn't tell you anything about Abe Sapien other than like, well, he was discovered or like they had this little sheet of paper that was dated the day that Abraham Lincoln died. And like, that's interesting mythos stuff. But as far as a character goes, I don't know anything about either of them.
I liked him just because he's got a cool looking design. And like the name like is just interesting. I like how they say, oh, it was a joke. I like that. But I legitimately forgot Liz existed when she popped up again.
Yeah, and the movie kind of it does a lot more with her, where like,
oh yeah,
I'd imagine.
Yeah. Like you couldn't really not do more with her, right? Like giving her 3 scenes would be doing more with her. Yeah, she is. There's a lot of stuff that is underutilized, and so I don't know. I definitely see why comparisons to the movie come up, because the movie is very intentionally doing stuff with a lot of the ideas laid down here. But that almost seems unfair because the movie came out in what, 2003?
Yeah.
So you got 10 years of retrospective of the series, and the fact that you know you're going to get at least one more movie, you know, going on in between this stuff. So it's just, I don't know, it's interesting to think about. Like there's always the rule of adaptation is it's hard to adapt something and make it actively worse. There are very few exceptions to that in my mind. But this is like just one of those cases of the adaptation is made under such different contexts than the original work was. Because this is kind of a risk when you think about it. You know, it's early days of Dark Horse with, you know, the creator-owned companies trying to come out and really stand up to Marvel and DC in the comics industry. It's got, you know, just a 4-issue run. That's all they're going to get out of it as a guarantee. You know, like, trying to do a lot more careful structured and stuff is really hard. So I'm like, well, I kind of agree with every complaint we've thrown at it, and the comparisons to the movie being, you know, doing this right. That almost seems really unfair to say because the context under which it was made is completely different.
That's fair, because, yeah, it's hard to look at this. You know, we can look at it now and say, like, well, there's been over 20 volumes of HellBoy. Like, this is a very long-running series with several spin-offs. And, you know, like, the spin-offs are really long-running, too. And so, like, it's hard to remember that at one time, you're right, this was, like, a risk from somebody who had done covers at Marvel, basically. And not too long after the series launched, the comic book industry kind of imploded a little bit. Like, this was part of a failed shared universe at Dark Horse where it was this series. John Byrne was doing a Fantastic Four ripoff called Danger Unlimited, which I actually really enjoyed. If you don't like John Byrne, Alfie, you probably wouldn't like it, but it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like Fantastic Four, but like with multiple timelines. It's interesting, but like it just abruptly ends because John Byrne, he said he gave it a mercy killing because the comic book industry was falling apart. And then there was Monkey Man and O'Brien by Art Adams. Like, all these books were kind of sort of supposed to be set in the same world, but then like no one's ever heard of Monkey Man and O'Brien or Danger Unlimited, and like HellBoy has gone on for 20 years. But like in the first issue, that Captain America type character, the one who gave him the gun, he's a character who shows up in like backup stories, I think, in Danger Unlimited. So that's kind of interesting from a historical perspective. Like, you think of HellBoy as being its own thing, but originally it was kind of meant to be part of a larger world that didn't really work out.
Yeah, that is really interesting, just to think more about the context of the thing. I didn't even think about the industry crash. You know, that didn't even enter my mind. And it's kind of funny you mentioned like that Mignola, the only thing he'd really done of significant note before HellBoy was covers for Marvel, probably variant covers that helped tank the industry. It's not that it's his fault or anything. He was an artist trying to get paid at the time. That makes sense. It's just like, that is really weird to think about all the different contexts of this.
He did Cosmic Odyssey at DC. Okay, I didn't know he had done stuff at DC also. Sorry.
I don't even know what Cosmic Odyssey is.
It's Jim Starlin wrote it. It has Jon Stewart in it. He destroys a planet. That's a big...
Oh, that piece of garbage that we've just never been able to get away from.
Yeah.
Oh, God. We've rebooted the universe like at least 7,000 times since then, and Jon Stewart always blew up a fucking planet.
He's good at it.
The universal constant in DC. Luther will always be Luther. Jon Stewart will always blow a planet.
Pretty much. Anyway, sorry, this is like completely different. Like, even in the fucking animated series, they had him blow up a planet for no goddamn reason. It's been like 2 episodes making him such a mopey character right at the beginning of Justice League.
Yep.
What the shit? Anyway, goddamn, sorry. Hellboy. What else can we talk about with Hellboy? Oh, okay. The fuck is Rasputin?
Yeah, well, one, this book spends like an entire issue. You're right, Alpia. It's very exposition heavy. I think all of issue 3 is Rasputin explaining his motivation and how he got from point A to point B. And I think they could have either A, spread that out over 4 issues, or B, don't give us all that exposition. Leave a little bit of mystery, because by the end, like, you know, it took me a lot longer to read these 4 issues than it really should have, just because of that one issue, which is like just blocks of text where Rasputin is explaining stuff. And it's still like, there's a lot because the Rasputin stuff, it's been about a year and a half since I've read any of this, but I don't remember when he comes back. I'm pretty sure he does, but I don't remember when. But a lot of this, I don't know when it will ever get followed up on.
Yeah, this entire book this is how I felt like just reading it. I was just like, oh, this is for a pitch. This is setting up everything at the expense of telling a stronger story, or being, like, you say it's self-contained, but like it sets up so much world building that they obviously wanted this to go much farther. And I feel like maybe they could have pulled back on that, save some of your cards for later, maybe get rid of Liz, keep Abe in it, just so you have like an extra member of the organization, but then focus on your titular character and flesh him out, which you kind of do because you get his like the whole origin story and stuff. But again, feelings, show me some feelings, rock hand man. But like apart from that, I totally just get the idea that, oh, I'm sure this is one of those things where like Ruben's gonna say, but in like issue 25, it's fucking amazing. The squid comes back and he's got a K-47, like that kind of thing. Yeah, this is just it just felt like, this is for later. This is for later. This is for later. This is for later story. This is for later. This is for later. This is for later. Here's a conclusion.
Yeah. I don't know, like, I was just trying to wrap my head around Rasputin because he's so weird in this. It's like, he calls the Nazis he worked with humans, and I'm like, so are you not?
Yeah.
What are you then? And then there's just other stuff that, like, I think is really cool ideas that Mignola sets up here, but I don't know how much he plays with them later on in the series, but, like, how to put this? Is it weird to anyone else that both hell and Satan and demons exist along with Lovecraftian monsters? That's a little weird, right?
I don't know. I'm kind of used to just comic books where every religion and theology and idea and just basic myth is correct, and we've just got everything. So it didn't faze me, actually. I was just like, oh, this is their universe's rule. They've got this. Everything's confirmed. Because, like, the first thing they see when they see a literal demon child is, hey, do you think maybe we could recruit him? It's not, Jesus Christ, shoot the thing. We get one guy say that, but then they're like, hold on. Merchandising.
Well, and, you know, like, you have the Lovecraft. See, I'm not, like, we talked about at the Mountains of Madness few months ago, and like I've recently been reading some more Lovecraft, some of the Randolph Carter stuff, and I'm discovering that I just don't like Lovecraft. Like, I don't like reading Lovecraft. I think I like some of the ideas of, like, there's a gigantic squid monster sleeping under the earth, but I don't like reading the stories. But like in Lovecraft, are the creatures gods, or are they just really old aliens?
Yes.
Okay, because that's what.
really old aliens are so above us, we view them as gods.
Gotcha. Okay. Well,
No, they are both.
that's what we've got going on here too. Because like when the Rasputin is starting to summon the what is it, the Ogdru Jihad. There's these aliens who just show up out of nowhere, and they're like, "Oh, those fools are gonna summon the Ogdru Jihad." And I was thinking like, "Oh, that's cool. They're not demons. They're aliens." But then I got to thinking, wait, that's exactly what Lovecraft does too. So, and I want to say that those aliens, like 20 years later, he did a miniseries doing more about those aliens. You're right, Alfie. There's a lot of world building and setting stuff up here. And some of it, I want to say he was setting up later subplots. And some of it, I think he was just like, he's thinking from a visual standpoint. So it's like, now it'd be really cool if I drew some aliens and drew a spaceship. And then like a decade down the line, he says, hey, it'd be really cool if I did a story explaining that. So I don't know if he's necessarily thinking about story with some of this as he was thinking about how cool it would look. And then later that he worked it into a story.
Well, I mean, because it does look cool. The guy's obviously got like a really cool visual style. It looks really unique. All this kind of just got like this gothic, like air to it, while still keeping all these supernatural and then also sci-fi elements. Like it's a nice blend of things. And I think the art, like really, again, I can't praise it enough. But it does feel like he's just like had like this fit of passion, all these character designs, all these crazy concepts, and like he couldn't wait to tell you all about it. So here's Rasputin's entire backstory because it's so cool. Look what the idea I had. And I'm like, yeah, it is really cool, but like it would have been cooler if you made that idea more than just this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and like a big thing that especially becomes more noticeable in later volumes is he is very much about like incorporating multiple different things all into one, like fusing it and turning it, almost creating a new genre. Like, he's very influenced by like Jack Kirby and Alan Moore and like H.P. Lovecraft and Frankenstein. That's a big, like all these different stories and creators and genres that he loves them all equally and tries to use them all equally. And like later on, he'll get to where it's like, okay, I really like Irish fairies, so I wanted to do a story about Irish fairies. And then like, it doesn't necessarily, it's just like, okay, here's Irish fairies now. It doesn't organically fit. Sometimes, like this series, especially when I was reading it a couple years ago, I was confused. Like, okay, is he trying to do like this big long series arc, or is he trying to do a bunch of solo stuff? And he does both. And so it's kind of hard to, especially the first few volumes, if you're trying to get into it, it's a little tough getting into because you don't really know what you're getting into, because you've got some standalone stuff that doesn't have anything to do with all the stuff here, and then you've got stuff that comes back from this volume and just when you've almost forgotten it.
That's really weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that just kind of goes to Mignola not having a huge grasp on storytelling. Like he's definitely got a story to tell, but he doesn't seem to, like, using this as an example and using what you're talking about in the series as it goes on, he doesn't seem to understand the idea of seeding things and getting proper payoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Or just like the it's cool to world build, but you gotta have a cutoff point somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an issue we see a lot with writer artists, like it's not all the time, but I kind of go back to Sean Gordon Murphy and Batman White Knight. It's a really good series on the whole, but there's like a lot of amateur mistakes from a storytelling perspective that just clearly don't seem to be thought through. And like, when you're okay, everyone will criticize an artist if they do like a really bad drawing, like Liefeld can't draw feet. right? Like everyone's aware of it. We all make fun of it. It's ridiculous. But like, we also make fun of writers for screwing stuff up and their bigger ideas. But like the thing we don't talk about as much is we need to be also more specific in criticizing writers for the steps they're taking that are kind of going awry, and people aren't giving enough credit for it. So like, if an artist can get scrutiny for drawing like a weird face in one panel, we should criticize a writer for the same level of mistake. And I think that's what Mignola has going on here, is like he's got the ideas, and the ideas are the easy part. He's handed off the scripting to someone else in this volume, which kind of goes more to show you that really all he has to start on are the ideas. And so, you know, Alfie, you said this reads like pretty typical John Byrne. You know, if I was just given this plot and I had to try to fit it all into a story, I'm not sure I could do much better. Like,
well, he's kind of that guy. Like, he's the guy who, we have an agenda or we have an idea. Like, that's what the Man of Steel really is. It's just like, DC, here's a pitch of what we want, and Superman put it to words. Like, he's good at that. That's why he's this competent. But yeah, I get what you're saying, man.
Yeah, it's just like you know, it's like, oh, and I want him to have this partner that's like a creature from the Black Lagoon, and he's also got a female partner, and she has like fire powers, and she's gonna get kidnapped really early on, but then she's gonna come back, and she's gonna be like Rasputin's secret weapon. And also we need to give Rasputin's backstory, because like he was in exile until he was recruited by the Nazis, but like really he was using them. And also we're gonna work in this whole plot with Hellboy's father being killed, and also there's like this family who does all these expeditions to the Arctic, and we're gonna find out that they finally found what they were looking for up there, and it was this Lovecraftian monster. And then like Hellboy's gonna fight the guy, and really it's not gonna come down to Hellboy beating him. Instead, it's gonna be Abe, who's you know, possessed by the ghost of the family. And I'm like, it's just a lot when you try to lay it out like that. And it's competently told. It's even well told in the context of just reading it and not really biting into it too hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing for me with my trade talk review of this. Is like, I read it and I tried describing it, because I usually give a plot synopsis in those. And I felt like I was losing something that worked in the story by describing the story. I was like, but no, it worked in the moment. And I think if you don't put too much scrutiny into it, it works in the moment, and that's about it. And so there's just this like lack of cohesion to kind of make all these different pieces into a whole.
Do you think this could have benefited if it was like an issue or two longer?
Yeah, reasonably. I didn't feel the pacing ever dragged too much, and that might have given us more time for, you know, character growth and development too.
That's what I was thinking.
But I don't know, like, that conceptually 2 more issues could help. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember the situation, but I'm not sure what they're gonna do in 6 issues that they couldn't have done in 4 to begin with. You know? Like, I feel like if it'd been 6 issues, it would have just been 2 more issues of a lot of wasted time and opportunity. When we talk about miniseries in comics, I always find myself talking about this with these, 4-issue, 6-issue miniseries in comics. I'm like, it feels like everything is still being set up until issue 5 in the middle. And I'm like, you should really be paying some stuff off by that point. And that just seems to be like a consistent thing with comics for me across the board. Like, I really liked Predator Hunters 2, but like, that was a 4-issue miniseries, and 3 issues in, we're still setting everything up. And I'm like, wow, that's it's a lot to pay off in one issue, and the last issue's there, and it's pretty good, but it's a lot in one issue.
I had that problem with the recent Kingpin series where like everything was set up and then like literally the last page was the payoff of everything, and it felt really anticlimactic.
Yeah. To be fair, I think that was intended to actually be an ongoing, and then it just kind of became a mini-series, kind of shamefully. But yeah, no, that definitely seems to be a problem we have with comics in general, is pacing them out across issues. But this definitely seems to be suffering from that same thing. Like, yes, conceptually, 2 more issues, you could take care of all this. I'm not sure if they would have, or if they would have just made even more mistakes in 2 more issues. I'm not sure what they would have gotten done in 6 that they couldn't have gotten done in 4.
That's a good point. I was thinking of, like, mostly, like you said, character growth. It could have been really cool if we had an issue where, like, the whole group, like when they're at the old lady's house, like before the Frogman attacks, maybe they could have all been talking about, like, hey, it really sucks that Professor Broom died. Like, you know, hey, remember when he rescued me from you know, whatever. You know, it'd be really cool if we could have had something like that where they're all kind of just acting like people. Because, you know, Hellboy, for all intents and purposes, is a dude. He's a demon, but he was raised by humans, so it'd be nice to see him act like one. Like you said, Alfie, feelings, you know, show us some feelings. And maybe 6 issues would be too long, but maybe an extra issue to kind of spread it out a little bit. Maybe that could have been cool. Maybe.
Yeah, or like even just, because my thing with these kind of things is never normally, add an extra issue, because I think that, like, you've both pretty much pointed out, like, perfectly, it's just, it can be a double-edged sword. It's always just, okay, how many issues do we have? What's the best story we can tell in those issues, and what do we need to cut out because we can't tell it properly? And, like, save for later. It's like, I feel like 4 issues of your first series, I think just the premise of, Ruben, you'll have to correct me if this, I'm sure it must do, but, like, do we ever actually get to see Hellboy, like, being recruited and training as growing up as a person? Because that was what I would have led with. And then do the story as an individual thing.
Yeah, there's some, like, years later, they did some stories, like, in the mid-50s, where it's like his first missions with the BPRD. And so, like, they do some where it's like they're going back and kind of filling in some of the gaps, but by and large, it was mostly just, like, especially the present series, like, it was weird because sometimes it would be something set in the present day, and then suddenly you'd do an issue set in the mid-80s or in the 70s, but like there was some fairly recent minis in the last few years set in the mid-50s, which is like Hellboy's first missions with the Bureau.
Okay. You know, that actually makes me think, and we can get back to the main story too, but what'd you guys think of the 2 little backups? Because I'm assuming you guys both had the volume that had the 2 original Hellboy promotional stories.
Actually, I didn't know, because I went on Comixology and just read the single issues, because, again, I don't know much about Hellboy, so I literally just looked up what issues are this Seed of Destruction series, because I didn't want to do the wrong one, because I didn't know.
No, that's cool, that's cool. It's just, like, it's 2 little 3-page comics that just are, like, were promotional material around the time, so it was, like, 3 pages of a Comic-Con 1993 special, and 3 pages from, like, a Dark Horse promotional special or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, here's Hellboy, and he finds a stray dog and tries to pet it, and then it turns into a giant kaiju monster, and it's really Anubis, and he has to kill it with a neon sign.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, here's Hellboy stumbling across an evil Nazi that's just a head in a jar, and it's got a mechanical gorilla slave that's experimenting on a woman, and Hellboy has to stop it. And I'm like, those are so much more enjoyable than the meat of the story to me. Like, you could have just given me 4 issues of 5-page stories like that, and I would have been so there for it.
Mm-hmm.
putting all this other stuff into it it really bogs it down in comparison to me.
Yeah, those issues that you're talking about. I feel like, especially the one with the dog that's Anubis, I really think that does a pretty good job of like telling us about Hellboy's character in such a short amount of time too. This book, he gets angry, and that's all we know. But like his attitude is so much more noticeable, I feel like, in such a short amount of time. Like it almost feels like it's like, is this by the same guy? I don't know. Like I like those stories quite a bit more.
No, actually, I'm kind of disappointed that those guys sound quite pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. Those are fun. I'm actually curious on something here. Yeah, so John Byrne did script. I like it. It's Mike Mignola, story and art. John Byrne, script and emotional support. That's funny. I'm just trying to figure out like if yeah, John Byrne just along for the ride. The credits in these backups are actually pretty funny. Mike Mignola, it was all his idea. John Byrne along for the ride. That's really cute. But yeah, so like John Byrne's still doing the same thing here, but it's just the tone is so different. It doesn't feel so doom and gloom and like the whole world's at stake. It feels more just like, all right, dealing with this shit now. Mm-hmm. And that's, I don't know, something about that is just so much more enjoyable. And probably serve as a much better introduction to the character and like, yeah, leave this kind of origin grandstanding thing for your later volumes, even if it's only like your dream for your second volume to go into all the origin stuff. I feel like doing just these more focused general threat, but it's not a problem because Hellboy deals with this every day. I don't know, I feel like that might have been a better start to the series, but then again, the fuck do I know? It ran for 20 years.
I'm just really curious what it was, because we've all talked about like there's some good stuff here visually especially, but we are all in agreement that the story is not at its best here. I'm just curious what people in 1993 were thinking, because it's the fans obviously kept this series going. So what was it that they liked enough to keep this series going, like to buy it in such numbers where it's like, okay, this is successful enough that it's going to run for 20 years? Like
I said, we hadn't been doing as much. Like, I'm really been racked my brain for like Monster Hunter stuff from before or running concurrently with Hellboy, and I'm like, nothing's really come to mind for me. Also, Lovecraft was not as big back then either. Mm-hmm. Like, Lovecraft went through a revival when South Park decided to throw Cthulhu in it. It's seriously, it was overnight Cthulhu became popular because of South Park. Cthulhu and Lovecraft as a whole became more popular because of South Park. Which, hey, what do you know? The thing that's problematic and kind of racist made something famous.
That's problematic and kind of racist.
Yeah, who would guess? The Lovecraftian lore has kind of always had this cult following, but
sorry, took me a lot longer to get that than I should have.
It's good. It's always had kind of this cult following, and yet it never really entered the mainstream. So I'm no expert, but I'm really racking my brain trying to think of something that was this openly influenced by Lovecraft, and in the mainstream, and nothing's really coming to mind. Because this was the 90s. The hot shit was symbiotes, not Lovecraft.
Well, again, like I know Buffy was just shortly after this, but I know like in the early episodes of Buffy when they're talking about like the origins of vampires, it feels a little bit Lovecraftian, but then the further you get into the Buffyverse, it gets more typical demons like, you know, Satan and, you know, devil horns and stuff like that, and it gets away from like the, you know, gigantic demons that, you know, ruled the earth billions of years ago. Like, but there's a little bit of that in early Buffy, just like mentions of it, but again, that's after this, so I can't think of anything before this though.
Mm-hmm. And again, like, if this was a 4-issue series and issues 1 through 3 sold well enough that they knew they were going to get issue 5, I don't think the problems that are here, again, are super noticeable unless you're trying to do the review thing of it. And keep in mind, this was when comics were cheaper. Not much cheaper, but cheaper. So it was easier to justify just picking up an issue of something you've never heard of and trying it for, you know, 6 to 10 issues. That was just more plausible. It was part of the new hotness of the creator-owned stuff. I can definitely see why this one was able to take off compared to other stuff that was just kind of, like you were saying, kind of, it's like this book from Marvel and DC, but not. This is pretty unique. Eventually, John Constantine kind of became this, but that was in response to this being popular. Like, you gotta keep in mind, this got so popular that DC tried to rip it off.
With Frankenstein?
With Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Marvel probably did something that I'm just not thinking of, trying to do the exact same thing.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. I know Marvel has Elsa Bloodstone and Ulysses Bloodstone. They're like British monster hunters, I think. And I don't know if they've ever, I mean, outside of like Next Wave, I don't think they've ever been headliners in their own series. But yeah, you're right. This is quite unique. And like, I think that comes from, instead of like looking around the same time period, like Danger Unlimited, as much as I enjoy it, it's Fantastic Four, but with a fresh coat of paint. And like, I don't know, Young Blood by Rob Liefeld is Teen Titans, but they work for the government. Like, they're not trying very.
And then Spawn is Spawn.
Yeah, it's Ghost Rider, but worse writing. But like,
that's really saying something.
Yeah,
but it's spot
on. But like this, it's pretty unique. Like, you know, you could look at it and say like, really, I would say it had quite a influence on other things. So it's like you said, John Constantine, there was a lot of like demonology and stuff like that, and, you know, fighting and hunting monsters, which I haven't read just a ton of Hellblazer. What I have read, it just really wasn't for me, and so I didn't keep reading. But I'd say there's a lot of stuff that probably owes a lot of its fame to this. So yeah, I didn't really think about that.
The biggest thing I can think of is, I don't know if either of you have heard of, because I'm now just imagining this was just really popular in Japan, because I mentioned the Yu-Gi-Oh thing at the start, like the artist was really big into this, but also like, if you've ever watched Hellsing, that's just this.
When did Hellsing start?
1998, 4 years after this.
Okay. And so what's the Yu-Gi-Oh thing again? Because I've never watched.
It's nothing to do with the series, but like there are some like art. I think Mignola himself actually did a collaboration with him, and there's like a picture of Hellboy wearing the Millennium Puzzle from like the main character. I think he's wearing his outfit as well, drawn by Mignola, and then Takahashi draws Hellboy in his Yu-Gi-Oh style.
Oh, okay,
That's
yeah.
really cool.
I'm seeing a picture now. That's kind of funny.
Yeah. I got a kick out of, you know, looking through the back of this, and you can see Mike Allred's Madman as like a variant cover for one of the issues. I thought that was kind of cool, and then I remembered when I was reading through part of Mike Allred's Madmen, there's an issue where Hellboy shows up.
Really?
I'd forgotten about that. You know, you'd mentioned the shared universe thing earlier. Allred's Madman was another thing that's just like really unique for the time, and so that's kind of where a lot of these creator-owned books actually stuck around. Madman is much more limited, but like Mike Allred kind of, I believe, has left the door open that he can go back to that whenever he feels like. And did Mignola end Hellboy? Did he finish this series? I could have sworn I heard something that like Hellboy's done now.
Well, it's always been, see, it was never just an ongoing thing. It's always been like a series of minis. And so he may have like taken a break, but I'm not caught up on it. But I think he's still doing like little stories here and there, I think.
Okay. I just remember Strip Panel Naked did a video where like Hellboy was in hell and he was talking, I thought he was talking about it as the conclusion of the series, but maybe I just misunderstood.
Yeah, he was in hell, and that was a few years ago. I don't know where that ended up going, because, like I say, I'm not caught up, but it's possible that he kind of ended it, but I feel like there would have been more hoopla over that if they had ended it. I don't know.
Okay. I don't know, just a thought.
But you mentioned Mad Men. That's or not Mad Men. Madman. Different thing, totally. But that's something I've always wanted to get into, and I read the first volume many years ago, and I haven't read any of it since then. Was it in the first volume where Hellboy showed up, or was it later on?
I feel like it's volume 2.
Okay.
I really do, because I read it. I just read like a section out of order from the rest. It had like an Alex Ross cover too, which is really cool. The 90s were a really interesting and daring time for comics. Didn't work out well, but it was really interesting.
Oh yeah.
Man.
Yeah, and if you like other artists like doing that whole synergy thing, there were a couple of volumes, I want to say they were called Hellboy Tells or something like that, where it's other artists doing Hellboy stories. I haven't read any of those, but if you're interested in that sort of thing, that I think there were a couple volumes that did something like that.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, since it's Dark Horse, I kind of have to ask, has Hellboy fought Alien and Predator?
Not that I know of, but it would not surprise me.
That seems like such a wasted opportunity if they haven't done that.
Yeah.
Why would you not do that?
It's possible they did, because like I say, I'm like Hellboy as a universe just kind of sprawled out and went in 1,000 different directions all at once. So it's really hard to keep up with everything that Hellboy has done, because there's 20 different volumes of BPRD. There's 10 volumes of Abe Sapien solo stuff. There's God knows how many Hellboy volumes. And so it's very difficult. And with BPRD, you'll have Hell on Earth, and then you'll have Plague of Frogs, because apparently Mike Mignola loves frogs. And so
get out of that room, there's frogs. Cracks me up every time.
Yeah. And I don't know, man. I think a Nazi made out of sand is much more interesting than a frog guy. But anyway, but yeah, so it's difficult. It's entirely possible that Hellboy has fought Alien and Predator, but I haven't read it if they have.
I mean, it just seems like if they got the license, why wouldn't you do that? Mm-hmm. Because it's weird. There's aliens in this volume. I find it funny we've gotten through the whole conversation so far, and no one mentioned that aliens just show up for a couple pages.
Oh, I did earlier.
Oh, you did? I must.
Yeah, but I think we were just kind of that was when we were harping on it a lot, and it just kind of happens, and it doesn't talk about it after. It's just oh no, the things, how they're doomed, and then they go, and I'm just okay.
Yep. And I like the aliens; they look cool. I think that's where his Jack Kirby influence is really coming in. And I love Jack Kirby's art, and anyone who is influenced by him, I'm usually down for it. But story-wise,
so everyone.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you've ever wrote or drawn a comic, you've been influenced by Jack Kirby, even if you don't know it.
Yeah. But yeah, I like the look of the aliens, but they don't really, they just kind of show up, and you're right. It's like, what were you guys doing here?
You just
do
like
something.
go up to them. What's going on?
Yeah.
Are you guys lost? Do you need an adult? Yeah, I don't know. Hellboy seems like a really cool concept and a fun idea. And like I've liked things that I've read with Hellboy, and I did like this at one point, and then just the second read through, the second I start being much more critical on it, and just try to talk about it for longer, the more of it breaks down. And I've definitely watched things or read things a second time and they've not been as good or whatever. I'm like, this wasn't as good as I remember it being. But to go back to something so recently and have my opinion be so radically different is just really, really odd to me.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had that experience before. So I just found that really interesting.
Have you ever, slightly off topic, have you ever had something where you watched or read something and didn't like it and then went back later and you enjoyed it a lot more?
Nothing's coming to mind, but I'm sure that seems certainly reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
That it has happened. Nothing's coming to mind at the moment, though.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's mostly the other way around, where I enjoy something and then many months or years later, I'll reread it or rewatch it, and it's like, oh, that's not as good as I remembered it being.
Yeah. I don't know. Usually I kind of end up sticking to my guns on things, and like I just kind of, I'll have my experience and then call it, and that's kind of the end of it. Sometimes I'll go back on a thing, like, I mean, I didn't delete the tweet. You can go find the tweet where I said, hey, Batman vs. Superman is really good, but I understand why people have their problems with it. That didn't hold up.
Breaking, Ian stubborn bastard confirmed.
No, like, that was my initial thoughts after leaving the movie, and then the more and more I thought about it, I'm like, no, actually, it's just really bad. There's just some great fucking ideas that they did to shit here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it's easier for me to think of things that I liked, and then upon reflection or upon another watch, I didn't like as much.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to the other way around.
Yep.
Because, like, how often do you go to a thing that you didn't like the first time and give it another shot? You know?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna reread Scott Snyder's Batman. That's not happening.
Scott,
I'm
if
not
you're
giving
listening,
that another. If there's more possibility to that than you might think. I'm just not gonna do that again. Like it's nothing against him or anything. Seems like a perfectly nice guy. I'm just like it was a bad experience, and I don't want to torture myself and actively put myself through this shit again. Unless it's for YouTube views. Scott Snyder's Batman, the rereading.
Live reaction.
Yeah, reviewing every issue live or some shit. That'd be torturous.
But hey, don't feel bad about saying that Batman vs. Superman was a good movie, because one time I said that Megan Fox was a good actress, and I feel eternally ashamed for saying that. So, you know, we all have our skeletons in our closets that are not in our closets, but like out for everyone to see.
I don't know about
I don't know.
I'm a fucking saint.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna start scrolling through that Twitter feed, baby.
Oh no! My more weakness, my Twitter feed. Shit.
Oh yeah. I don't know. Like it's funny to think about that stuff. God, what was it? Batman Superman thing. I remember looking up reviews right after it came out, right after I watched it, and. Not that she is a paragon of review culture, but I just found this really funny. Grace Randolph did a review, and she's like, guys, I think we gave Zack Snyder Watchmen too early, and he deserves another crack at it, because this was fantastic. Jesse Eisenberg's performance was groundbreaking, and I'm just like, whoa! What a review! And like, it's just funny because she's usually the one that so taps into all the controversy, and it's like, we'll just kind of go with whatever the general, try to like pick whatever the general perception's gonna be, and go with that. So to see her just be so off her usual mark was really funny to me. Anyway, yeah, we're not even talking about HellBoy anymore, so I guess we should move on to ratings. Alfie, what do you rate this book?
Well, I think as a pitch, it's pretty solid, but as like an individual like trade, I read out just on its own. My first exposure to HellBoy. This is my only exposure to the entire universe and the characters. I thought it was pretty poor, so I'm gonna have to give it 2 frogs out of 5. It's fine, but it's not even. It's fine in a way that doesn't make it enjoying, and I can't ever see myself going back into this ever again.
Just curious, Alfie, did this, do you think you're going to like go and watch the movies that are out or watch the one that's coming out this year?
I don't know, because like, honestly, Ruben, if you hadn't suggested this, I would have probably never checked out HellBoy for my life. It's just, I see it, it looks cool, but it's just something, I don't know, I just never vibe with it, I guess. It's just something I never had the desire to, and this definitely didn't give me a desire to, it just gave me more questions. And it's just, I feel like, yeah, maybe, I'm not never say never, but yeah.
Right. Fair enough.
Okay.
Okay. Is it my turn to rate it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So visually, I think this book, I'm going to give this 3.5 harpooning ghosts out of 5.
What's up with that?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, they try to explain it at the end, but I don't know. I mean, that ghost picked a heck of a time to decide to do something. He could have saved his wife's life before. Like, hey, this dude's manipulating my wife. Maybe I should harpoon him now. Anyway, but
no, he needed someone to harpoon him with.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Well, possess one of your frog sons. But anyway, yeah, visually is what brings it up so much, because it would be, if it wasn't such good artwork, it would be like a 2 out of 5 maybe. So I think what makes it worth reading is the artwork. And I still like HellBoy. Like, I've got a decent amount of HellBoy books. So, but this is not the best that world has to offer by any means.
All right. For me, yeah, it's also just, there's stuff here that I like. The art is undeniably fantastic, and that's the thing that, like, really is gonna probably attract you the most to the series, is the ideas and the art. We've been really harsh on it, but I do want to establish, I think most people can read through this, and if you're not trying to be critical, if you're just kind of there for the ride, you'll be fine. It's not overly bad. So, I'm going to give it 2.5 out of 5 stone fists.
Mm-hmm.
Just cause. Alright, so then it's my turn for a topic discussion for next week. If we have done it already, it's been a long time, I don't remember, and so I don't remember my own opinions on it if we've already talked about this. So we're gonna discuss merchandising.
Oh.
So it's like, action figures, breakfast cereals, pajamas. There's like geeky merchandising. So yeah, that should be fun. Alright everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Comics Kid 2099.
And I am now and forevermore a geek for fun.
Alrighty. And we are your geeky gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.